Hey guys, and welcome back to Top Cheddar Sports. Today we have a special video. Today is, what's today's date, Vic?
The 15th.
Friday, November 15th. Yesterday, on Thursday Night Football, the Steelers and the Browns faced off, and a lot happened in that game, and the aftermath has now, the dust has fallen and settled. So we put together this impromptu, Vic on a computer, me in real life, meeting to kind of discuss everything that happened, what we think should have happened, whether or not we think the NFL did it right, and to kind of go into that and what should happen going forward, since this is, I would say, the first time we've seen anything this bad. We've seen heinous acts in the NFL before. It's obviously a violent sport to begin with. So it shouldn't come as a surprise when some things get ugly, but last night I think was one of the worst things we've ever seen happen on a football field. And, I think there's a lot to talk about here. And Vic, since you are a Steelers fan, I think it's good that we go ahead and say that because obviously some bias could be there, but I am not a Steelers fan. So, we can kind of get that perspective and also get the perspective from you, and kind of just to take that into account in case, things seem unfair.
I'm a Steelers fan. The Steelers come first and foremost when it comes to football for me and teams I root for. So, I will try and look at this unbiasedly,
yes.
But also as I can give input as a Steelers fan how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good to hear what you think, because obviously, if you do feel the NFL did it right, then that's the best case scenario, is that the Steelers fans and, organization feel like they weren't done dirty. But Vic, you were watching the game. I only got to see the aftermath and kind of rewatch everything that happened. Do you want to go ahead and break down everything?
Yeah, so, the main issue we're going to talk about here is it was the incident between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph as the primary two people, along with Marquise Pouncey, being the primary people involved here. However, the situation, the Browns are up 21-7. There is 8 seconds left in the game. It is third down. The Steelers are backed up into their own 10-yard line, roughly, off of memory. So the game is over. It's 3rd and 8. It's not 3rd and short. We're not going to convert. This game is over. So obviously, never give up. Never throw in the game. Mason Rudolph on 3rd down hikes the ball. Is facing pressure. Throws it to his receiver. And while that was happening, Myles Garrett hit him. Took him to the ground. Clean hit. I personally get fed up with when we say there's a lot of roughing the passer. I don't believe this was roughing the passer just based off the hit. Mm-hmm. And Myles Garrett kind of laid on him. I don't think he realized Rudolph had thrown the ball right away. And from what I saw live, it basically looked like Myles Garrett was laying on him, wouldn't get up. I don't know if they were intertangled a little bit. It kind of looks like Rudolph almost went to if they were a little tangled up and Rudolph went to move his helmet, and then Myles Garrett basically you see rip Mason Rudolph's helmet off of his head completely, at which point Rudolph stands up. Marquise Pouncey or another one of our linemen, I don't know if it was Pouncey at this point in time. Sorry, I've got a lot of angles to this. And was in between them, and Mason Rudolph started yelling at him. Obviously, rightfully so, he just has his helmet ripped off. Rightfully so, in my opinion. I would have been pissed too if this happened to me. And then Myles Garrett, I don't know what was said between the two. We don't have it mic'd up. Myles Garrett then took Mason Rudolph's helmet, which he had in his right hand, and swung it and hit Mason Rudolph over the head with his own helmet. This is what broke out into the full-out brawl between the two teams. After the hit, Mason Rudolph turns around, looks at the ref. I'm amazed he could see the ref because there's no doubt in my mind that man is concussed right now again. I'm amazed we haven't heard word that he's concussed yet. Anyways, Marquise Pouncey went after him, and he full out was throwing haymakers, and he hit him like 4 straight punches to the helmet, which couldn't have felt good for Pouncey, and then proceeds to tackle him. Another Steelers lineman was on top of him, and then you see Marquise Pouncey kick him in the head. I will admit, like, after all the punches and he gets up, he kicks Garrett in the head, and then, is it Ogunjobi?
Yeah, Ogunjobi.
Ogunjobi, for the Browns at that point in time, because Mason Rudolph was coming back over, but also you don't want the QB involved, and he didn't have a helmet. Ogunjobi flat out decks Rudolph from behind. He doesn't like fall over, he doesn't throw a punch or anything. But that is where I saw the primary act of Ogunjobi. So all this being said, everything's sorted out. This brings us to the suspensions of today.
Yeah. So real quick, just to kind of clear up the one thing, it was actually David DeCastro who was holding Garrett back and trying to protect Rudolph, as a good lineman does. It was then DeCastro who fell on Garrett and kept him on the ground, kind of acting as the mediator, Ben Simmons style, if you will. And then that was when Pouncey, and I didn't realize this, that was when Pouncey came over and started throwing his punches. So Pouncey,
Pouncey threw punches while he was still standing up, though.
Oh, okay.
And I can watch this video one more time, I believe. Like, he threw punches, and then Garrett kind of got tackled as he was being, at this point, pretty much pushed back by 2 different offensive linemen.
Right.
He's not expected to win that battle. So DeCastro was still kind of in the middle and was the one who tackled him. And then Marquise Pouncey was throwing the punches and then kicked him once DeCastro had tackled.
Right. Okay. So the suspensions, as you said. So what we got was Myles Garrett is suspended indefinitely, as you pointed out to me right before. That is at least the rest of this season and the playoffs, at least. So more could come. Marquise Pouncey, for his involvement, received a 3-game suspension, and Ogunjobi received a 1-game suspension, and then both teams were fined $250,000.
Yeah, that's hefty.
It is. I mean, that's a lot of money. So, we can kind of break it down, player by player. But I think one thing to point out was there was a really ugly hit early on in the game that caused which Steelers receiver was that?
This was on Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, caused him to bleed from his ear on a helmet-to-helmet hit. Something like that I feel like deserves to be looked at. I don't know if any fines have been levied for that, but that's something else that the NFL, I think, needs to seriously take a look at.
It was safety Demarius Johnson from Brown came in. Deontay Johnson didn't even catch the ball. It went off his hands, and he wasn't, like, he was defenseless at this point in time, and Demarius Johnson came in, helmet to helmet. It was after the play. There was no need for this, but it wasn't like a clear, they blew the whistle, and 10 seconds later he comes flying over Vontaze Burfict style. I do want to note that. Like, I'm not trying to make it out like I just think this is the worst hit I've ever seen. That being said, there was no need for it. Deontay Johnson suffered a concussion, was immediately taken off. He was bleeding from his ear. It was ridiculous. And Demarius Johnson seemed, watching live, surprised and upset that he was ejected for this. And I don't know what is going through his head that he is not realizing how bad this was.
Right.
Hopefully when he got a chance to see the replay, because I know every player thinks they make the play or it's not as bad as they think live.
Absolutely.
He realizes. But, yeah, that is the other main one that we can also get to.
Yeah. So, all I'm going to say is I don't know if anything's going to come of that. If he was ejected from the game, at the very least, I see a fine coming his way. But I think the main thing that we should really focus on is the fight and the aftermath and the suspensions that were given out. for those. So just based off of these 3 players who got suspended and the suspension lengths, just your gut reaction to that. How do you feel the NFL did?
Okay, top down, from worst suspension to least. For Garrett, I like it. I was going to be time and time again, and I talked about this with you yesterday.
Yeah.
I feel like the league talks about cracking down on these kinds of things, and then I don't necessarily see the discipline I expect to see for what cracking down radiates in my mind. So, if he didn't get at least 4 games, I was going to be upset just watching it live.
Yeah.
The more I look at it, I wanted him out for the rest of the season. I think the NFL made the right call here, suspending him indefinitely, but throwing in that he is out for no matter what the rest of this season and next. I honestly think the NFL might look to do something like a 16-game situation, and they don't want to say how many weeks next year he might be suspended until they see if they make the playoffs. I think they might be doing a 16-week or game type situation. So if they make playoffs, maybe that's 3 less games he's suspended for next year. I will be surprised if he's suspended just the rest of this year, and after them initially making it indefinitely, him not being suspended for the start of next year. But all in all, jumping back to it, I like how the NFL handled this suspension.
Okay.
Your thoughts on this one?
So with Myles Garrett, I absolutely thought he deserved to be suspended for the rest of the season, like you said, and the postseason. I'm extremely happy that the NFL did that. I'm curious to see what this suspension is for next season. I kind of have a feeling it'll be an instance where he's suspended for the entire preseason and therefore will not be allowed to participate in any team activities during the preseason, won't be able to use team facilities. I think that would be more than fair. And then it would be I'd be curious to see if it bleeds into the regular season or not. At that point, rest of this season, postseason this year, and the whole preseason, I feel like is getting close to fair at the very least. And we can kind of talk about how now that they have a template to work off of, how they should go about this, and maybe after this season create some new rules for situations such as this. But I think they... Oh, sorry. I think they did it right.
Rules like this situation when nothing... And I can truly say, I've never seen anything so egregious.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm young. In my time watching sports. And I want to add in for the modern era of the NFL. Like, I've watched highlight videos.
Right.
And primarily for the Steelers. So I've seen their games back when, like, the Super Bowl era just started. And players on the Raiders who have this reputation, and it was on ESPN and NFL Network, so I'm able to talk about this way, literally went around as if their coach said there was a bounty on the Steelers' head. They would just punch them when they weren't involved in the play or looking. They gave concussions. This is why the NFL has moved to where we are today.
Exactly.
And trying to get away from all that. So in what I will say is the modern era of 2000 up, even from pretty much when we've been watching football, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, including all of Vontaze Burfict's hits.
Yeah, I agree. That was it. I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah. I will be interested. I would be okay, I think, if it's the rest of the season, postseason, and then not allowed to use their facilities or be with the team in preseason. If we play them week 1 of the year, I may have a change of heart, and that may be the Steelers fan in me. But I just feel like if the first game he plays back is against Pittsburgh, they're just asking for more trouble.
You're right.
Which I want to add in, before we get any further, 2 weeks from now, the Browns play the Steelers in Pittsburgh this time. So this all happened in Cleveland. I'm worried to see how this plays out. I am.
Yeah.
Especially because these games are so close together. Pouncey won't be back for it. Garrett won't be back for it. Ogunjobi will be, so we'll see. Moving on down your list, the next suspension, the one for Marquise Pouncey for 3 games. I'm going to give my input, and then you can tell me if this is biased or not. But I absolutely hate that he got 3 games here. Like, I hate this. Did I expect him to get suspended because the league is cracking down? Yes. I expected maybe a game, max 2. But I thought he would probably just get a large fine and then a game suspension. Because when I look at it and I look back and you see a player throw a punch or a couple punches during a game, like Josh Norman and OBJ, if I remember correctly, they got ejected for that game and got fined. Mm-hmm. And they didn't take any suspension afterwards. And when you look at, obviously kicking a guy in the head when he's down is no small thing to overlook. But at the same, like, the kick is what I think gave him the 3 games. Because to me, if he got suspended after punching a guy who just wailed a helmet over his quarterback's head, I would be pissed. And I know you're not supposed to retaliate, mm-hmm. But tell me, if you're a quarterback, your backup quarterback, let's say that, we already lost Roethlisberger. So Rudolph is looked at as needs to be kept safe even more. Takes a helmet, his own helmet over the head. Like, yeah, I would be punching the guy too. Granted, I'm nowhere near as big, so it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But I would have just as much anger as Pouncey did. So I am upset he got 3 games. I would have given him a game. If you want to make an example, I would give him 2, maybe, just because Cleveland's that second game. But honestly, if we're just trying to be objective and say Cleveland's not that second game, I give him a fine and a game. So I am upset by this one.
Yeah, I think his overall involvement and then, you know, him kind of extending it past just, you know, the interaction between Garrett and Rudolph. You know, like you said, you hate to see the person who retaliates also get, you know, equal treatment. Thankfully, in this case, it wasn't equal. His retaliation isn't causing him to be out indefinitely. 3 games does feel potentially like 1 too many. I think 2 games would have been absolutely fine to prove a point that, listen, if you do retaliate, you are going to have to face some consequences. But in a situation like this, again, Pouncey is a lineman. His job is to quite literally protect Mason Rudolph. And that's kind of what I see this as. Like I said, I hate, and you know, talking as Sixers fans, when Jimmy Butler got ejected from the playoffs because Dudley specifically went after Embiid, and he was simply trying to protect his teammate and getting Dudley off of him. And both of them ended up getting ejected. That doesn't feel fair, and that's kind of a situation such as this. Pouncey was trying to protect, I mean, at this point, Garrett was already taken out of the situation, in which he then was kicking him while he was down. But 3 games, like I said, feels like a bit much. In my opinion, I would have given him 2 games, and then I would have also given Ogunjobi 2 games instead of giving Ogunjobi 1. I would have just given both of them 2. And in my opinion, that would have been fair.
I also felt, this is interesting, because to me, I felt like Ogunjobi, unless I missed a hit in there, all I primarily saw, mainly, I guess because I was watching Myles Garrett get thrown to the ground and kicked in the head at this point, was Ogunjobi kind of push Rudolph from behind when he didn't have his helmet and everything else. So I was surprised Ogunjobi got the game that he did. I almost felt like him and Pouncey's were both excessive, which maybe I need to watch this again and focus on him in this, because maybe I did miss, like, if he threw a punch or anything. But what I saw from Ogunjobi was he pushed Rudolph while Garrett was already down. And it wasn't like a nudge. It was like a hefty shove. But still, he pushed him. And then I saw Cam Hayward, the Steelers' defensive lineman, captain of the team right now, and one of our primary captains for the years, came onto the field at this point because it was our offense on the field, and then him and Ogunjobi started exchanging words, but it didn't look like I saw any other physical altercations for Ogunjobi.
In my opinion, if you go after the other team's quarterback, that seems excessive and unnecessary, especially if you are the size at which Ogunjobi is. If it's two linemen going at one another, yeah, that's fine. But, whether or not we should, start taking into account size, I think more importantly, it's the importance of the quarterback to a team and to blatantly, that's why we have all these roughing the passers and, protecting quarterbacks.
So, I feel like Ogunjobi should have had, based off our conversation just now, one less game than Marquise Pouncey. And that being said, I feel like 2 is excessive for Pouncey, or 3 is excessive for Pouncey. Mm-hmm. So maybe 1 is good for Ogunjobi. But yeah, that's my take on it.
So overall, though, with everything, with all things considered, do you feel like the NFL did a good job?
Overall, yes. I am a Steelers fan upset about Pouncey's, but when you objectively look at it as him throwing 4 hefty punches at his head and then kicking him in the head while he was down, mm-hmm. The NFL, I feel like this is the first or second time they've truly done what they say they're doing when they say they are cracking down on this type of stuff, and I'm not thrilled with the outcome, but I do accept it and think it's fair at this point in time.
Okay, yeah, I think they did a good job for once, and now what I kind of want to get into is, this was obviously excessive. What happened? What Myles Garrett did was, terrible. No tolerance needs to be the way in which you go about something like that. So moving forward, like I said to you last night, this was really I know Garrett has received fines, but this is the first time I've ever seen him do something such as this, to the point that, had it been, before halftime, he very clearly would have been ejected from this game. There was really no rhyme or reason for him to do what he did. The game didn't mean anything at this point. Obviously it means something because it's between two rivals, but the game was over,
Cleveland is a rival for the fact that they're in our division. And in some ways, that is it. Like, during our lifetime, Cleveland has not produced the way, to the point in games like, let me restart here. Most of my life, every year, it's nice to know you have 2 wins out of Cleveland. Because
right.
For most of our lifetime, we have been the better team, to the point that last year when we tied them, it was actually sad, like, for Steelers fans. Like, you expect that to be a win. I look at the Bengals as a rival because of all the nasty hits lately that have come, even though we typically beat them also. Yesterday is the first time when all this stuff started happening that I felt like from here on, for at least the immediate future, there's going to be bad blood between these teams, and that is going to lead to heated rivalry games that we see between the Steelers and Bengals and the Steelers and Ravens. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, yeah, so, moving forward, you can take into account that this was something between two rivals and what have you. Obviously, tempers can rise. But I think moving forward, there needs to be a bit of a template, something that the NFL normally doesn't seem to have when a new situation arises.
Right.
So what I was going to propose, I kind of have an idea of how they should maybe go about something like this, and I kind of want to hear your feedback on it, and see if you think that this is something that's just and fair, if there's something you would tweak about it, and if you have any idea of how they should handle stuff like this from now on, you also come in. So Vontaze Burfict, had another dirty hit and ended up getting suspended for the rest of the season, if I'm remembering correctly.
Correct. I believe his was also labeled as indefinitely. Yes. However, minimum the rest of the season.
Yep. And at that point, it was week 4.
Yeah.
So that's a 12-game suspension.
Right. Plus possible playoffs.
Right. So now with Burfict, it's a bit different because he's a repeat offender. In the case of Garrett, I haven't, to my knowledge, I can't remember him getting, ejected or suspended previously.
Right. Nowhere near the history that Burfict has.
So my proposition is this. What happened, you would deem an incident. Garrett being the primary person involved in the incident. For their part, Pouncey and Ogunjobi got suspensions. But this goes on Garrett's record as incident 1. Think of it as, how in the NBA you accrue flagrant foul points. Almost like that, except your first incident, you get a half a year suspension. So 8 games. And that could be if it's week 10, or if you've played 10 games, so you have 6 games left. It would be 6 games, and then playoffs can count towards it if your team's in it. If not, then it goes into the preseason.
Preseason or regular season?
Well, I guess regular season. It should be regular season games or postseason.
I would definitely not count any preseason game as a game at all, considering starters don't typically play.
Correct, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Not weekend facilities, has an impact, but nowhere near the same as not playing a game.
Correct. So, I think it should be a half-year suspension. Pretty simple. Look at the MLB. I believe your first suspension for PEDs is, I want to say 50 games. They may have upped to that. Then your second offense is 100, and then your third is you are suspended from the league indefinitely. And that's what I think the NFL should do. So this would be incident 1 for Garrett. He gets 8 games. Fine and dandy. He's allowed to play again. If this happens again, he misses an entire season. I think that's more than fair because you had your warning. You've had your quote-unquote slap on the wrist.
What do you count as this happens again? Because I really hope that never again in his playing time he takes a helmet and whacks it over another player's head. So are we talking just something so flagrant, such as a late helmet to helmet, that's an incident?
So that's something that they would have to, map out what would be considered an incident.
Okay.
Similar to how a flagrant foul it has to be looked at, is this a flagrant 1 or is it a flagrant 2? So something like that. So it would have to be looked at. It would have to be put under a microscope. So obviously there is still going to be objectivity to it. But for the most part, it'll be pretty obvious when something would at least be considered such. So I think that, right, it's not necessarily that he hits somebody in the head with a helmet again. It could just be something that is, as simple as quite clearly targeting someone, that you can't really have any tolerance for that, and breaking out into a fight. If you are the main cause of said fight, if it's 2 players going at each other, fine. But if it's a dirty hit, and then you get up swinging, that would fall under an incident.
Okay.
So I think
I like that system.
Yeah, so I think then, second incident, that's 16 games, a full season, and we can include playoffs in that. And then if
after that, indefinite.
You do it a third time, you're quite clearly a repeat offender. You haven't learned from your first 2 times, and that's a pretty hefty thing. If you install hefty sanctions such as that should deter players from doing said things. And if they do it once, okay. Like I said, slap them on the wrist. Hey, it's going to be big though, because you shouldn't have done it. And you knew what would happen if you did. If you go out and do it again, you deserve a bigger punishment. You didn't learn from your first mistake. If you do it another time, you didn't learn from your first 2 mistakes. You've gotten your 2 strikes. That's your third. You're out.
I agree. And I almost wish it didn't take till this point to hopefully play in a system like this. Obviously, we don't want to see anything so egregious and flagrant in any sport, especially in football. by so many injuries that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think a repeat offender just goes to show like they shouldn't be out there every week because they're clearly a liability for their team. And honestly, like they put other players physically in danger. I would be scared if I had to play against Perfect every single week.
Yeah.
Compared to any normal defense. Like you're going to get hit hard either way, but one might be clean and one might not be. And I feel that if we had this already in place, Perfect would probably be out of the league by now.
Absolutely.
When you look at everything he's done so far.
Yeah.
And maybe, and this goes back to I am a Steelers fan, have always been. So maybe this is me biasly, but it's so frustrating when it seems, I know there's been nasty hits all over the league, but when Perfect's half of his suspensions have come on hits against the Steelers, and now like this happens against the Steelers, it frustrates me that it took this long. And I know there's other ones in the league. I'm not saying we're the only one who dirty hits happen against us, and I'm not saying we're angels either, by any means. But when it seems like the ones that we have to review and wait till the next day or two to officially give a suspension because it is that bad and we want to get it right, it seems like half them come against our team, and it bothers me that it took till now, but I am happy that they are finally starting to get it right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the things where, saying that it feels like it happens to your team. I think a lot of people would say that because you're noticing those hits. You're taking note of, the games, you're watching your games. So you may not notice the other stuff that's happening across the league.
That's completely fair. I'm sure the Carolina Panthers feel that Cam Newton has been subject of it over 50% of the hits in the league as well. So
right.
It is a personal bias to some extent because that is what you see, as you said.
But you are absolutely right. It is good to see that they finally seem to at least do one right. The one other thing that I want to bring up with Garrett and then my whole system that I kind of proposed, do you think that Garrett should even have the opportunity to appeal his suspension?
No. And here's why. Because if we're going to get the opportunity to appeal at this point, like this was so... They took a day to make sure they got this right, okay? And I'm sure there was a lot of talk, although 8 of those hours normal people were sleeping. I'm sure there was a lot of talk all through the night about how to handle this. So if we're going to take that much time to handle this, then clearly they probably shouldn't go through an appeal process because then it's undercutting what was fair. And I feel like if we're just going to allow appeals and see them successfully to a point that they're a precedent, that we're going to hit a point where now we're just giving out suspensions more than what's expected because we anticipate an appeal. And all around, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with if we put this in place, if it is already deemed a flagrant 2 or whatever terminology we decide to use, that it should be an appeal. I think something minor like kicked out of a game and you get a fine, or even I would say up to penalties, where you're not the primary one involved, but you also took a hefty suspension. Yeah. But when you are the primary person in this incident, to the point that you're getting suspended half a season, no, you shouldn't be allowed to appeal.
Absolutely agree. Okay.
I have 2 other points I want to talk on quick because I don't want to carry this out too long.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Do you think if this wasn't Mason Rudolph, backup for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are on the outside of a wild card at this point in time, and this was a big 5 QB in the league, I'll say, of Brady or Rodgers or Breeze or maybe even Ben Roethlisberger or somebody else up in that tier that has been around for that long and has made such a name that they have a Hall of Fame candidacy in the future, that we would see a more severe suspension?
Well, it's hard to say because he's suspended indefinitely. So we don't actually know how severe this is going to end up. But what I will say to that point is these guys who have been in the league for so long have garnered all this success. Like as you've said, they've paved the way, and you know, they are a lot of the reason why people continue to watch the sport. They latch on to these kinds of players. I think they have garnered such respect that Garrett or any other punk, young, defensive player wouldn't think twice of doing what he did to Mason Rudolph. It may sound kind of stupid, but, you know, the whole you haven't been in the league long enough to get that call type of thing goes almost the same way with you've been in the league for so long that I don't think I'm going to fuck with you kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. And whether or not there should be favoritism, I can find examples across all sports, both for my teams and against. Yeah. So I agree with how you phrase that. I don't always like it, but I agree that's the way it is.
Right.
So, yeah. The other point I want to bring up, obviously the fines were hefty. It's hefty for somebody like us to look at it. For a multi-million-dollar franchise, in each of them, it's enough to say, like, don't do this again. It's not enough to break their banks by any means for either one of them. So I'm okay with the fines. Kind of deters. In one way, I feel like it's make sure that management is involved more, coaches, to make sure their players don't do this, because not only is it on the player who can't participate in the team, but now we don't want this for the team, let alone the look it gives the team. But anyways, earlier in the game, Deontay Johnson, as we mentioned earlier, got hit by their safety. I want to make sure I get the right one. I believe it was Demarius Randall. Demarius Johnson, sorry. Hit Demarius Johnson, safety for the Browns, hit Deontay Johnson, wide receiver for the Steelers. Helmet to helmet after the play, we talked about earlier, somewhat after the play. He was bleeding from his ear. To me, that hit needs to be the same or more than what Pouncey got for kicking a guy in the head. Am I out of line for saying this, or is that a bias?
I think what makes that hit so bad was the fact that Johnson was literally bleeding. If it would have been a helmet-to-helmet hit that, you know, was very unnecessary during the play, and, you know, he got ejected from the game for it, I don't know. I don't know what the league would do with something like that. I agree. I think he should probably get, 4 games for that, but I don't know if the league would actually do that.
I personally want 4 games or more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's bias. At a minimum, I want him to get 2 to 4 though from this. And the fact that we haven't heard anything about this hit, because it's being overshadowed by this huge event that happened, I'm worried they are going to kind of push it under the rug, in which case I think will lead to more dirty hits on both sides or at least a more physical game than usual when we play them in 2 weeks on our home turf.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the best thing for either organization, but kind of when Juju hit perfect for all the past history between those two, I very easily see this, if he's not suspended and with how everything happened, not necessarily how it ended, but what all happened in this game, I see this turning into a very physical series in the next few years, especially 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if all Johnson gets is a fine. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't even get a fine. I won't be surprised if he only gets a fine, and I won't be surprised if he gets less than 4 games. I would actually be shocked if he got 4 games. I don't think he will. Maybe he gets 2. I'll be surprised with that, honestly.
And this bothers me because it comes back to, are we actually cracking down? I know you're taking care of the big issue here. But if you really want to get rid of helmet to helmet that bad, I feel like a fine only does so much, because that man is still back out on the field the next game. He's still making money. He's already a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. After how well they handled this huge incident, objectively, I will be upset if they don't give any type of suspension. I would rather see a suspension than a fine to Demarius Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And based off the league's history, I don't know if it will happen. And then I will start to wonder again if we are actually cracking down.
Right. I think what they're going to have to take into account, and what they most likely will take into account, is was he targeting? Was it a targeted hit? Burfict, a lot of his hits are targeted hits. You can tell that he was intentionally leading with the crown of his helmet and trying to connect and injure players.
That's fair.
So that's what they're going to look at.
I always thought Burfict should have gotten more than he did.
Yeah.
So that's why I look for 2 games from this.
Yeah. We'll see.
So, yeah. I do want to also give a shout out to Mike Tomlin and Baker Mayfield for how they both handled the situation. Obviously, after losing 21-7 on the road when you didn't play that well,
mm-hmm.
you don't want to talk to the press, and then everything like this happens. And sometimes people are made out to be bad guys because of how they handle press conferences, but Mike Tomlin basically didn't comment on the whole thing. He basically, if you didn't see his interview, go watch it now, everybody. But it lasted all 22 seconds, I believe. He went up there. They tried asking him 3 different things about it. He said, I have no comments. You all saw what I did. I'll let the league handle it. So
yeah,
I liked how he handled that. I also appreciated Baker Mayfield, who I will say I am a fan of. I was not a fan of him when he came into this league based off his reputation in college. I since, for his actual attitude, have come around to him. And I thought he handled this very well without even trying to defend Myles Garrett in this. He basically said, also, if you didn't see what he said, go look at it. But he said, I didn't see how it started. All I saw was the replay of what happened, and it's inexcusable. We won't be having that. He can't be doing it. So I did appreciate that, even though he's your teammate, you didn't try and stick up for him when you clearly knew this is so bad that it shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what I would want to see from my captain.
For sure, yeah. Baker gets he gets a bad rep for his press conferences. And I still am ready for people to give him crap for for throwing his teammate under the rug, if you will. But with heinous acts such as that, yeah, he let reality show, and he was absolutely right in everything he said.
Yeah, the minute they had talked to him, he was in a lose-lose, because if he doesn't defend this guy, somebody's going to be like, you won't even stick up for your teammate.
Yep.
And if he does defend this guy, once the suspension is out, is on record defending a guy who just is out at least half a season.
Right.
It was a tough situation for him to begin with, and I thought he handled it. I've come around to him a lot. I've really appreciated how he handled that as somebody who is, for the foreseeable future, the future captain of that team, and truly a leader in that locker room.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Anything else to add on?
No. I mean, obviously, like we said, we'll see what happens 2 weeks from now. We'll see what happens if there's any suspension for the hit or fine on Deontay Johnson. And finally, we will see next year, I guess, how far indefinite it goes. But
yeah,
I look forward to seeing all of it. Not always happily, but it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. I agree.
So, let us know all of your guys' thoughts on all of this. Did you think each of these suspensions were warranted? Do you think that $250,000 will hurt teams that badly? And do you think each team should have gotten the same fine there? Do you think the other hit deserves a suspension? And how do you feel about Baker's post-game interview?
Absolutely, yeah. And sorry that this video is as long as it is, but with instances such as this, putting together a long video where we can really hash out the details, give our opinion, our feedback on whatever it is that went on. So this, the Antonio Brown video that we did, they are a bit longer, but they're issues that we felt deserved, almost a podcast length of time to really, work out what needs to happen with an instance like this.
Absolutely. Hopefully we don't have to give any more anytime soon.
Yeah, seriously. Although we could talk about the Astros.
Another day.
Another day. All right, so that does it. Like Vic said, let us know everything you guys think down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.